Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to move forward into the next session. Our next session topic is From Risk to Resilience, Building for the Future. This session has been designed in collaboration with European Union. This session focuses on the development of future-proof infrastructure in cities like Mumbai to combat the impacts of climate change effectively. We will explore successful strategies European counterparts employ and examine ongoing initiatives in river water management, flooding, and waste disposal within Mumbai. This session is going to be chaired by Mr. R.A. Rajeev, former Metropolitan Commissioner of Mumbai. To tell you a little bit about Sir, he is a highly accomplished retired IAS officer from the Maharashtra cadre and brings with him a treasure trove of experience and expertise spanning over 3 decades. As the Metropolitan Commissioner of MMRDA, Mr. Rajeev has successfully managed major infrastructure projects, including the ambitious Mumbai Metro and the groundbreaking Mumbai Trans-Harbour Link Sea Bridge. In addition to his achievements, Mr. Rajeev is recognized as a leading thinker on urbanism, valuing innovation and collaboration. A very warm welcome to you, sir. So I'm going to request you to join us on stage. Moderating this session is Ms. Supriya Krishnan, PhD researcher at DU Delft Resilience Lab, TU Delft Global Fellow. Let me introduce our speaker to all of you. She's an extraordinary architect, urban planner, and dedicated researcher who fearlessly explores the intricate relationship between urbanizing and climate change on a global scale. Her work seamlessly integrates research, practical implementation, and education with a strong focus on fostering urban resilience, mitigating climate risk, and envisioning inclusive planning strategies for the cities of tomorrow. Joining this panel virtually, we have European Union delegation, Ms. Camilla Christensen. A very warm welcome to you as well, ma'am. We have some more speakers joining this panel, but for the time being, I'm going to allow our moderator for the session, Ms. Krishnan, to kindly take over.
Good afternoon, friends. Can I have the presentation, please? Though I'm chairing the session, I am also there as speaking on the waste management, sustainable waste management in global coastal cities. So though the waste management is a broader topic and it's like in all the developing countries, at least it's an issue. But I'll focus my presentation on the global coastal cities context. Yeah, so can I? Yes, so can I have a next slide, please? Oh, okay, thank you. So, as in the previous session, my friend Mr. Jalota, mere humnaam, Rajeev Jalota, was saying that the population is concentrated in coastal cities of India. At the global level, this is the situation that we have a global population in 2% of the earth houses almost 13% of the population, which is ever increasing. And this is what the rising tide, assessing the risks of climate change and human settlements in low elevation coastal zones. This research says that it is ever very rapidly increasing. Coastal environment, as we all know, is characterized by the mangroves, estuaries, beaches, bays, coupled with population growth, tourism, and pressure from commercial projects. The previous session also talked about the port operations. That also increases offshore oil and gas explorations, increases the complexities of the coastal areas. lack of appropriate and sufficient land for landfill sites. Landfill, because uh, from the very beginning, when the waste processing technologies did not evolve, most of the wastes were being landfilled. And when I say landfilled, it's a very scientific terminology. Uh, when it is not scientifically done, unscientifically done, it is called dumping in our areas. We have the dumping grounds. So we have the shortage of dumping grounds or the landfill sites in coastal areas as it is, because A, they are low lying, B, they have less land in the vicinity to accommodate the waste which is coming out of the rapidly increasing population in these areas. So, and the whole process of waste management gets complicated by the ever increasing population. At the same time, the climate, the global warming and the climate change conditions, which has resulted and has been resulting into very frequent extreme weather conditions. And this basically complicates the whole waste management processes. The coastal areas like the Earth Summit from 1992, I'm just giving you a bit of history of the international issues when they all were raised. And in the Earth Summit, the Rio Summit of 1992, it was said that this is the one of the very serious, most challenging problem faced by the world communities. And up to the UNEP 2011, we said that we have to protect the marine environment, we have to protect the seas, the water, the coastal areas and all. So this has been highlighted by numerous international resolutions, organizations, and the agreements which we have with us. But what is the main reason for all these wild dumpings or unscientific waste management processes, which results into climatic uh, challenges? The global warming conditions is the methane which comes out of the landfill waste. If you see, the landfill waste contributes to the global methane emissions according to around 11% of that. But the World Bank predicts that 70% of it will go up to the 70% landfill gas contribution to the total methane emissions by 2050. Because from the all other features, the methane emissions are reducing, but from landfill gas, it is increasing because most of the developing countries, most of the coastal areas and all, we are not able to manage our waste properly. This is like we say that it's a 28 times more severe than carbon dioxide. Why I have written 80 times is that when we say 21 times or 28 times, it is over a period of 100 years. If you calculate it over a period of 20 years, it becomes almost 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And this is where we should all be very, very concerned about the way we are treating waste at present or not treating waste at present. There has been a satellite findings. Now you can read how much methane is coming out of which landfill sites all over the world through satellites sitting in somewhere Canada or somewhere US. So that satellite has given a picture of 2020 that 3-4 cities in the world are having the maximum methane emissions. In that you have Buenos Aires, Argentina, New Delhi and Mumbai and Lahore in Pakistan. They had pictures. I'm sorry, I'm using only black and white because there is nothing colorful about waste management. So I'm using a black and white slide deliberately because of that. But the issue is that the study findings reveal that landfill in Mumbai emitted approximately 9.8 tons methane per hour and 85,000 tons per year. This is the situation in Mumbai at present, and the Buenos Aires was higher than that. Recently, I think most of us might have read in the newspaper Times of India that in BKC, which is the most developed area, we say, and commercially developed area in Mumbai, there was a complaint that in one school, the parents said that the SOx and NOx and formaldehyde level was very, very high. It was found in one study. And if you see the public censor, this is quoted from Times of India, the public censor in BKC shows that these pollutants were well within range. SOx at 4 parts per billion and NOx at 8 part per billion. Whereas this school had SOx 87 part per billion and NOx at 97 part per billion. This is the study in that area. Acceptable levels are 22 and 15, like that. So why? There is no dumping ground nearby this school. There is a debris being dumped in the neighboring open land of that. And there is a Wakola Nala which is flowing behind this school. Since most of the slums, they dump their garbage in these nalas, this nala, and most of the other nalas in the city, this situation has happened. Either it can come from the dumping ground of, can I have some water, please? Dumping ground of debris dumping ground, but I doubt, because whatever knowledge I have, the emission of methane coming out of the dumping ground, if you have debris dumping on a ground, it may not have that much of emissions of methane. So I doubt that it is coming out of the debris dumping place. It might also be coming out of the Wakula Nala, and I would like my next participant in this thing, who will talk about the Mithi river and all, will talk about this hazard also. Thank you. So this is the latest picture. This is 27th May. This is the situation, and this is one of the elite school in Mumbai where this situation is going on. I've just given this data so that we all are here who are sitting here. Most of you are well aware of the situation, but I'm just saying that this 62 million tons, it's not metric tons, it's million tons of waste. Only 43 million tons are collected annually, because there is a gap in total generation and collection. This is one. And only 28% of waste at the national level is being treated. This is the situation at present. And this waste is increasing every day. By 2030, you will have 165 million tons of waste in this country. We are very fortunate that in 2014, Honorable Prime Minister gave the clarion call of Swachh Bharat. And after that, Government of India's schemes, as well as the state governments also got motivated to contribute towards the scientific waste management in the country. But still, the gap is very, very high, and we need to do a lot, and we should have done it yesterday, but yes. So now coming to the components, most of us, we know about it. We should be collecting 100%. We should be segregating at source. We should be doing waste reduction by treating compostable waste at the household or the society level, and the ALMs in Mumbai, they all have been talking about it. Reuse and recycle, the 3R principles should be implemented before we transport it and it goes to the processing plant on the landfill sites. So there are different technologies of treatment. There are different disposal ways. After treating the waste, we should be disposing only the inert to the landfill sites and engineered landfills. But the situation was, for example, you see in Surat, there was one engineered landfill which was done. I think the first in the country was built up in Surat, the engineered landfill. But the Gujarat Pollution Control Board took up objection saying that as per the municipal solid waste rules of Government of India, you can only uh, dump inert material in the landfill, engineered landfill. You cannot dump anything else. You cannot dump biodegradables. You cannot dump anything. So the engineered landfill was constructed, but for years together, it was not used. So this is one. The other condition, other example is of Kochi, very interesting example, where they didn't have any landfill site. And they decided in 2006 that some contractor will get appointed, he will take the waste, and we are not responsible where he is going to dump it. So hundreds of trucks started going out of Kochi and landed up at the forest check naka of bordering state of Karnataka. They would stop there. Then there was a lot of issue about it, and this waste was dumped somewhere else. Even Kochi Municipal Corporation didn't know about it. Then another 100 trucks went to Tamil Nadu border, and there they were checked. So there was a lot of issues about it. Then the I think the port, Kochi Port Trust gave some land, and then they started dumping there, and they wanted to stop it. Nothing happened about it, and till there was an accident, and one US naval, I think, helicopter or plane got met with an accident because of the birds on the dumping ground there in the Kochi area. So there have been very severe issues about the waste all over the country, and Kochi being one of the coastal countries, not having land at all for that. So this is the main slide where I was trying to bring all of you together, why we have failed so far, why we have not become successful doing this. See, for a very long time, till 2014, I remember when President Johnson in United States in 60s had said that, let's make America beautiful. That was the slogan he had given that time. And the whole advertisement about how to stop littering, how to treat waste, and how to do everything started in America. And America is today what it is because of that clarion call by the topmost executive in the country. That was in 60s, in probably 60s or 70s, I think 60s, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So it has taken so many years for India that in 2014, given credit to the present Prime Minister, he gave Swachh Bharat this thing. But still, we have a long way to go in that. So priority of waste management, which has been a very primary priority, we'll say the very first priority, one of the of municipalities is waste management, has been only of this thing. The problem with the municipalities is that they lack knowledge, they lack finances. So competency at the ULB level has always been an issue. I still remember I was in Municipal Corporation of Mumbai and I was handling waste management. Solid waste management department was with me. And when I joined, I didn't know ABC of waste management. So gradually when I learned about it, I realized that mechanical engineers were managing solid waste management department. Whereas when you go to the landfill sites where every day some fire used to break out, Mr. Rajkumar Sharma is here, he will vouch for that because he used to suffer the smoke in Chembur from Devnar dumping ground. So the issue is that the landfill site was not being stabilized properly on day-to-day basis. It was not being managed on day-to-day basis. When I talked to the mechanical engineers, they didn't know what was stabilization of waste on a slope, because it's the subject of civil engineering, not mechanical engineering. So slope stabilization of waste on a dumping ground has to be managed by civil engineers, but Mumbai Municipal Corporation had only mechanical engineers. There are most of the municipal corporations which have only doctors managing solid waste management, no engineers at all, no environmental engineers. So we started recruiting environmental engineers in municipal corporations. The capability is a major issue. And this capability, competency is also lacking in private sector. Very few private, professionally good private players are there in India who can do waste management properly. They all do cost cutting measures. So that's how you get a lot of contractors in civil engineering field and in road construction and building construction, but you get very few players in waste management who are good. So yeah, lack of awareness about the harm, unscientific disposal of waste can, of late there has been a lot of awareness about the methane and its problem and the climate change issues and how it affects climate change, how it affects global warming, but earlier it was not there. Legal loopholes at every level of waste management, there are legal loopholes, and the unscrupulous players, they get benefit out of that. They take benefit out of all the legal issues. Like one I quoted, that Surat Municipal Corporation, they constructed well within that, well with good intentions, the engineered landfill, but they could not use because somebody else came in and said that you cannot dump biodegradable waste there in that. So there are loopholes at every level, and the myth is that waste is a wealth. Waste is a wealth, which is not 100% correct. Yeah, some part of waste can be wealth. If waste would have been wealth or waste would have been gold, then people would not have thrown it in their dustbins in their own houses. They would have taken benefit out of it. Some part of it can be, you can recycle it, but it's a dirty game. Recycling is a very dirty game. You go and see the recycling plants. You cannot stand there. The smell which comes out of those recycling plants. So if we take waste as a wealth, then we think that the private player who is doing waste management is making a lot of money. And if we come up with that concept that the private player is making a lot of money, then we cannot give him money properly. He cannot earn money properly to run the waste management plants. And the basic aim of waste management fails in this whole concept of it. See, the PPP models, most of the PPP models in waste management has failed because the municipal corporation have been thinking that the private player is making more money and the private player was not able to even earn money. See, I can go into details of the compost which he was extracting out of the waste management. That compost is not at all better than the soil, as soil stabilizer work. You cannot call it a compost properly, because from the municipal waste, if you create compost, it's not as good as you create compost or make compost out of the agricultural waste. There is a qualitative difference in that. So because of that qualitative difference, the municipal compost is not sold in the market at the same rate at which you can sell out agricultural compost made out of agricultural waste. And that's how, if we do not know this difference, we will think that this private player will be making money out of selling of compost and everything. It's very difficult. So there are myths, then lack of modernizations we have in the sweeping thing, in the collection thing, in the processing thing. We have not adopted a lot of mechanization, the developments which has happened elsewhere in the world. In these parts, we have not adopted, and we have been very slow at adopting those things. And the last one is lack of data about everything. And this lack of data is something which is really very, very puzzling, because if you do not know how much waste is generated in an urban area, the urban local body cannot account for their 100% collection, 100% transportation, and 100% treatment. So these are the issues where, if we become aware, we focus and we pay attention to these issues, we cannot do waste management. But at the same time, I'll say that the thing is not as complicated as it looks like to be. We should be aware of that there is the cost of wild dumping is too high, and it should be somewhere. We should change this practice of business as usual and do waste processing 100%. Net zero goal we are talking about, but net zero ki precondition, the precondition of that is that we should have zero waste strategy. Zero waste strategy means as much waste you divert from going to the landfill and recycle them. That is the way we can gain, but it has to be a gradual process. It cannot happen on day one that you divert all the waste from going to the landfill site. Slowly, we have to build on that and handle waste processing. I have talked about proper accounting system, recycling, yes, disposal of sanitary engineer landfill, and the support of the state to the urban local bodies who are basically suffering from finances and the competency, these two issues. There has to be, there can be different methods of handling it. You can have a para-statal bodies where the expert advice is there. They can provide expert advice, like State Waste Management Authority can be created, or you can have something like that, a regulatory body which can also tell the municipal corporations and the municipal bodies how to go about it, how to tax it, because you need to generate resources to manage waste. I stop it that if there will be any question, I'll answer. Thank you so much.
Hello. I think the questions might have to wait till the end because we have a speaker waiting online. So, but I will come back to you. Hi, Kamala, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation today to the Global Coastal Cities Summit. Thank you very much to Mumbai first, to Mr. Nair for the invitation. And of course, it's a pleasure by the delegation of the European Union to India that we undertake this session together. First of all, I would like to share with you on the EU delegation, the EU and the government of India. We work on a partnership with this on smart and sustainable urbanization. This is a partnership since 2017 between the EU Commission and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And this relates to smart and sustainable urbanization. Within this framework, we work on we do work on the solid waste, and this is also a topic mentioned in this session. But we work also on the city climate action. The government of India, of the EU, has a shared vision of a sustainable urbanization. I would also like to mention in this regard the EU Mumbai partnership. It is a partnership between the EU and Mumbai since 2013. This is a long partnership, long and strong, close partnership, which we highly value. And of course, Mumbai First is our partner in the EU Mumbai partnership. So we are working and have been working together on sustainable urbanization, on topics within this sector, relevance for Mumbai, relevance for India. And of course, now we are participating also in the Global Coastal City Summit. So also in a more global context, we can say. I'd like to mention a few things in this regard. First of all, I think when we talk about coastal cities and we talk about city climate action, we talk about ports as well, is that what we see is that we may come up with a set of project ideas on what to do in certain areas. It could be solid waste, it could be urban resilience, it could be urban infrastructure or the nature-based solutions. So, but to get from there and to the more detailed description of a project, which is also could be interesting for anyone who wishes to fund this, whether it is a partner from India, whether it's a partner from abroad, whether it is leading or feeding into one of the program and missions of Government of India. It could, for example, be the AMRUT program of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. We have done the work on the preparation of what we call a toolkit for bankable projects, and we will learn more about the toolkit later in the session today, wherein our expert from our EU-funded project will speak and share with you also about this work. And why are we working on this? Is that we did see a need to be more specific about what is it we want to implement and what does it cost and what is it to be presented to anyone who wishes to fund, you can say. So this is one point I wish to mention, and this work has been also undertaken in close cooperation with Mumbai First, with the Mumbai Port Authority, with CIDCO, and with Mumbai as well. Second thing I'd like to mention is that we have a program from the EU, which is the EU International Urban and Regional Cooperation Program. And what it does is that it brings cities together. So it brings cities together from Europe and cities in India. In this program, we have around 24 cities altogether. One of them is the city of Rotterdam, and they work in a close cooperation with the city of Surat. And it is a benefit in many ways, a mutual benefit, because the authorities of the cities are working closely together on different areas of work. And it can again be on solid waste, but it can also be on urban flooding. It can be on other, you can say, topics of a mutual interest, but also which are contributing to sustainable urban development. It is also contributing to the climate and energy targets, both of India and also globally. And in this regard, we had also been exploring together with the Mumbai First about port twinning. So I'd like to mention this here, port twinning. And of course, we also have a speaker today from the port of Antwerp in Belgium in the session. And actually, it's a topic which could be explored. It could be beneficial when we talk about global coastal cities and port twinning, because of course it could be on different areas to work on. Running the ports, but it could also have an element of the global coastal cities and what cities can work on in this regard. So I think this is the second point I'd like to mention here that we would like to cover in the session here today. A third, since previous speakers spoke about the solid waste, I think I just want to say that when we say that the solid waste could be looked as a wealth or as a resource, there's definitely multiple benefits in producing the energy from the waste. Basically, the electricity production from the waste, from the methane gas. I mean, that is one aspect of it, if we already have a large amount of the waste, and the possibilities of exploring the potential of producing the electricity from the methane gas. Another part of it is also what we look at focus on from the EU side is basically to reduce the waste, reduce at any steps when possible, reduce the use of materials and therefore reduce the amount of waste. Of course, and following that is to minimize, to recycle. So there's different steps in this regard when we look at the waste. And in this regard, when we look at the cities and the urban local bodies, my understanding is that maybe it's a little bit a two-pronged approach here, because the urban local bodies is responsible for solid waste management, but on the other hand, it seems that all revenues is responsibility of state government. So maybe could be something to look at, because if you have a task but you're not responsible for the revenues, there may be something to look at in order to make that function in the best possible way. So thank you very much for the invitation and all the best for the summit today, and of course for the session. Thank you very much.
Can I have the slides, please? These are not my slides. It's Supriya. Well, till my slides are uploaded, I'd like to, well, it's my great privilege to be moderating the session from risk to resilience, building for the future. My name is Supriya. I am a PhD researcher in climate resilience and also an urban planner. Well, my research, I conduct my research from the Netherlands, but Mumbai happens to be one of my primary case studies. I focus a lot on the knowledge divide for resilience between the global north and global south. Previously, before the PhD, I used to work with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And I see that the slides are not uploaded yet, but maybe so there seems to be a technical issue, so we're going to go to the next speaker first. So I'm going to let Pooja take over.
Thank you, Ms. Krishnan. That's very kind of you. I'm going to call upon yet another panel member of this panel discussion. Please put your hands together for Mr. Shankar Deshpande, Chief Mithi River Development Protection Authority, MMRDA. To share a little bit about our speaker, He's a dynamic leader overseeing the urban development of the prestigious Bandra Kurla complex and Back Bay Reclamation Scheme SPA area, where he handles crucial responsibilities such as building permissions, modifications in plans, and allotment of land. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Requesting you to join us at the dais.
So good evening, everyone. Just to make you feeling that afternoon is quite over, we are far away from the coastline now. We started early morning at about 10 o'clock when this room was talking all about climate change. Slowly, as the first tea sessions and the lunch, we started adapting things in the hall. Post-lunch, we have mitigated. And those people who are here are highly resilient now to the issue. That is what my feeling is. And for all of you are here. Since morning, we are looking at Mithi in a different perspective. You saw some slides, and Mithi was not looking good at all. But this is, in fact, Mithi. And I would also request Rajeev sir, this is taken photograph from the commissioner's room. It looks like this. And this is the Mithi river, sir. We worked in about. This is Bandra Kurla complex. We have the mangroves which are declared forest here. So thanks Mumbai First and the organizers for asking me to speak on Mithi river. In fact, this is more of a response since what we gathered in the morning. We talked about sea level rise. And I have to be sustainable myself, because what you do today, you have to leave something better for the future. So I have to leave some crowd for the next two sessions. So I have to be really quick. So let me focus on sustainable development goals. And two of the goals are number 11 and 13, which talk about doing much things about sustainable cities and climate change. That's why we are all here about. We're committed to do that. We have seen about some scientific figures that in the last 100 years, we were contributing to about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters a rise in the sea level. And then recently we have found that the rise has become about 3 centimeters per year. That's what the figures are, 3 to 3.5 millimeters. However, most of this, the cause of the action is again human beings. We talked about Japanese example, we talked about Singapore examples, we talked about Asian contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, but let's understand that economical development will have some energy footprint, and there will be also some gas emissions and some green gas emissions. However, the attempt is to see that the energy efficient ways of economic growth model is adopted. That's what we should all aspire. But aspiring only that one particular country or one particular continent has a developing potential and has a less good footprint. We talked in the morning about that, but I'll not comment on those issues. If we see at vulnerability of the coastlines, Pan-India, Pan-Mumbai Metropolitan Region and Mumbai, I'll use these words Mumbai and Mumbai Metropolitan Region together, because I'm an urban planner, regional planner doing master plan for Mumbai Metropolitan Region also, and we prepare regional plan for Mumbai Metropolitan Region, as well as Mumbai, which is 437 square kilometers, and Mumbai Metropolitan Region is about 10 times that, even 12 times now with a growth area of about 6,000 square kilometers. So if you see the MMR's coastline is about 800 kilometers as against Mumbai, and you see the vulnerable population of about 17 million to 13 million. And we talk about density of Mumbai about 28,000. And then you see how this coastal city, which is economical hub, is so vulnerable with the sea level rise. This is what we have seen in the morning, but I'm not very happy with this kind of. Does this work so that I can be a little mobile? Hello. Hello. So since morning we have seen this 2030, 2050, 2080, and this red alert, this red things, and this arrows. But this again, data, as one of the speakers only told that this data is not exactly which is for Mumbai's topography, because it suffers from two limitations. One is that the sea level rise is general, and it is not very specific to what is in Thane Creek or what is going to be in next to the Mumbai coastline, number one. Number two, the effect of sea level rise on the tidal action, again, the modeling is not scientifically so accurate to predict that this scenario will exist. However, as was put up in the morning session, if these scenarios do exist and we are certain to have some rise, maybe we are not accurate, maybe 0.5, 0.7, maybe in 2040, 2050, but we still have to build up the resilience around all of this. So this scenario is just to tell you that we have to be alarmed that there is going to be some amount of sea rise, some amount of tidal action, some amount of extreme event, and some amount of combinations of that which is going to happen. What exactly happened in Mumbai is an extreme event on 26th of July 2005. And if you can see these two red curves of tide line and the rainfall per hour, then you can see that average annual rainfall, which is about 2400 millimeters, we got 40% of the rainfall in just 24 hours. And the Chitale committee report then found out that the extreme events are those events which happen 1 in 1000 years, when the highest rainfall also coincides with the highest tide. That is what exactly happened. In the density of about 28,000 people, the damage was colossal. Economic damage was about 1,000 crores, about 900 deaths took place. Airport was not operational. When we see all this, this is just to tell you that if you don't do anything and your business as usual continues, then these scenarios will repeat, because as we have seen, the 1.5 degrees is going to happen much faster than we think. And if that rise happens, this phenomena will be much faster. That is why the government enacted many things. This is flooding. We saw the damage since morning. One thing also to be noticed is we talked about Mumbai, we talked about reclamation, we talked about the plains in which the flood spots are there. We talked about the two railway lines around that the flood spots are there. All this, what we are trying to say is that where there is high density development, the flood is occurring there, so damage is much, much higher. So we need to really act upon the stormwater drainage systems and the draining systems in these habitations. If we see at Mumbai, basically 4 rivers, and why is Mithi so important? If you just Google today, for the today's sake of things, I was trying to do it, Mithi is Googled more than Mumbai itself. That is what we are finding. That is the amount of what we can say attraction for the people to know whether Mumbai is safe, if Mithi is safe. And I see a little smile on your face, sir, but I'll reply to that. If you see Mithi, it's about 7,000 hectares of catchment area other than Oshura, Dahisar, Poisar. But if you see the slide below, Tulsi, Vihar and Powai are the 3 lakes in the Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Tulsi, this overflow goes into Vihar. Vihar's overflow goes into Mithi, and Powai also drains into Mithi. So this Mithi river, which is 17 kilometers, actually what we say is the only drainage which is safe during the storm water for carrying out the entire 50 to 60% of the runoff in the catchment area of Mumbai. If you say this river also has a typical characteristics. Now, if you see Mahim Causeway to this red spot, which is here, you have, this is Bandra Kurla complex, MCGM, MMRDA does work in this area. But if you see the slope, it's very flat. And up to this spot, you see the tidal effect. So the tidal effect is about 7 kilometers in this area. So you have a high tide, you have a low tide, and you have a runoff which has to be carried. So this is something typical. But if you see from Vihar Lake to tidal effect, which is MCGM's portion, you have a very steep slope. So the runoff reaches very quickly to the red spot. And the tide also reaches in the high tide very quickly to tidal effect. And you see something which is called as airport is located at the red spot. So that is why you saw most of the damage taking place. And if the airport is shut, you understand the city has come to the standstill, people can't move. Most of the areas are located highly dense in this area. So the treatment for this tidal effect to the Mahim Causeway on the right, which is MMRDA portion, is little different than the treatment in the north area. So we have this return period concept, so that how much time will this event occur again? So if you have a return period of 1 in 100, so every 100 years this occurs once, is in the tidal effect. And in the area which is for municipal corporation, we have 1 in 10. So every 10 years, if the event occurs, we have to do something for that. Again, the catchment area, this is what Mithi River is looking like that time. And even some portions today, where you see that the encroachment habitation is exactly on the banks of the river. Sometimes when it dries up, it's on the bed of the river also. What we want to tell you is that the tidal effect, the red spot to the Mayam Keys is perennial because you have tides, high tide and low tide effect on this. But if you see the northern side, it's on the overflow. So when there is no monsoon, there is no actually less water there. It's only the sewage outlets and the industrial waste, which is not treated or treated, comes into these areas. So what did government do? After 2005, there were several interventions. We have Chitore committee report who was asked to do why did this happen and find out what are the extreme events. We had IIT Bombay to prepare environmental action plan. We have Mithi River Development Planning Authority. We have a member secretary and project director is myself here to talk about what should be the then. We have the CWPRS, the central government is to do the actual modeling and understand the combination of high tide, low tide, precipitation, because there are many uncertainties. Exactly rainfall cannot be predicted, what time, what intensity, what duration cannot be predicted. So we have to do 1D mathematical model, we have to use softwares like MicFlood, we have to do physical modeling, and then we have reservoirs actually kept in the Pune model, which is of this room size, and then we let off at different intensity of rainfall, different reservoir levels and different high tide levels, and then see till what level the flood line is marked. And after doing this study, we came to a conclusion that something has to be done for this Mithi River deepening and widening. This photograph on the right hand side is on 25th 2010, when we prepared a master plan to decide upon what should be the cross section, what should be the deepening, what should be the widening, what should be the slope on each section at every 50 meters of the entire 17 kilometers of Mithi River. The return periods are mentioned here, and we designed upon the what should be the retaining wall, what should be the service road, etc. But this picture shows you about the airport, and what is particular about this airport also is, actually, if you see here, the river initially flew like this. This was a channel, and the airport was entire 600 hectares of airport through the chambers, and north of this about 11 kilometers was draining entirely like this. We had to stop the runway. You can see the flight, this portion was to be stopped. This has to be widened. So we had an additional channel constructed like this, which looks like this to you today. This was constructed by MIL. So the city had to intervene with latest technology to do it so that the flights are not abandoned. But you can see that this entire portion here was restricted to only this portion, and the work took place here. This was done by MIL and GVK. The point to be told is MMRDA, MCGM, MRDPA with the support of state government had to intervene and do several operations to make Mithi safe. Now, deepening, widening, rock excavation, retaining wall, service road, all the works, about 95% of works are completed. About 1300 crore expenditure has been made. About 10,000 encroachments are removed, and 5,000 of them are resettled. This is the task. I wanted to just give the size, the scale, and the speed at which the works have taken place. This section is just to tell you the images of before and after. The blue section is something which was before, that is 2005, and the red section is what is 2017. You can see the average increase is 25 meters of width, and the average deepening is about 2 meters. This is to just indicate that the entire cross section of the river has been increased. Just to tell you about this was the slope of the bed level. You have a high tide level here, so when there is a water here, you actually don't see what is at the bottom, but the bottom is something like this. And this total bottom, according to the modeling of the CWPRS, had to be removed and to bring down to the bed slope at red level. So if you see the Mithi River, it's what you see is widening. What you don't see is deepening. Sometimes you see deepening during the low tide, but actually the slope also has to be increased. Why was all this done? This was all done because we have the influx of water from the sea very fast, and flooding is then happening because you have to get out the water much faster in the time of heavy rainfall. So the bed slope also helps you for draining water much faster, and even during the submersible flow, which I mean is that whenever there is high tide also and rain also, if the bed slope is given in this direction, we could have the velocity of the flow much higher to drain off the city water. Again, some challenges I will not go, but achievements I wanted to just highlight. The holding capacity, we talked about Rotterdam model. And in the model, they showed that there was a river which is already flowing, and they had another channel, and in between those two is the real estate. We don't have real estate in between those two channels, but what we have done is, you can see the holding capacity increased by 2 times. If you just see the confluence in Bandra Kurla complex, where the Mithi river and Wakolonala meet, you will see a huge holding plant has been retained, and every year we have to deepen it, remove the dirt, remove the silt, and it acts as holding pond. It acts as holding pond to keep the high tide between the high tide reaching at Bandra Kurla complex and not reach to airport. And during rainfall, all water comes and stones here. If there is no high tide, the water will go inside the sea. What has this helped? This has helped the flushing capacity. Dissolved oxygen levels have gone up. BOD, COD levels have gone down. The velocity of water has increased. River ecosystem has been rejuvenated. And all of this, including the expenditure done by MMRDA, MCGM, other things, 11 bridges. Let me tell you that there are over 15 bridges, out of which 11 have widened because the Mithi river was very constrained before that. These are some of the images, and I told you that we have used adaptation by widening of this. This is your airport, CST bridge, Wakolonala. You can see on the left-hand side is 2005 and 2023 on the right-hand side. So these are the images we can see. Actually, the retaining wall, there's a thought going, why retaining wall? But retaining wall does 2 functions. One is flood protection. The water doesn't spill out. And secondly, encroachment protection. We had to use the Disaster Management Act to remove the encroachments who are causing disaster upstream by blocking themselves the way on this, and who are themselves endangered by being in the path of the Mithi river. Some of the examples of what beautification things can happen. This is Bandra Kurla complex just behind our office. What MMRDA is doing is, have taken learnings from MCGM preparing climate action plan for Mumbai. We are now doing a climate action resilience plan. As the morning somebody told that we are preparing an action plan for the entire Mumbai metropolitan region. And that step is authority approved, budget provision made. And sir, glad to inform you that this is going to talk about carbon footprint. This is about talking about resilience. This is going to involve all the corporations, all the council, Jilla Parishad, collector office together. So there is co-creation, there is collaboration, and there is going to be cooperation between all the urban local bodies to prepare the resilience plan for Mumbai metropolitan region for the next 50 years. We are going to talk about climate change. We are going to talk about adaptation. We are going to talk about mitigation. There's going to be toolkit design and programs and actions according to that each year. I'll just take 1 minute, ma'am. That is what I talked about, the regional plan, and our corporations and councils taking their own bit. We have approaches to go in front of us. Here's my second last slide, which told us that we could have interventions at regulatory framework, government intervention, and public at large. We could either face the risk, which we have today, either confront it, like in London, Venice, Netherlands, by constructing a retaining wall right here, and confront the sea, but it requires 3 times the more cost than what we can do it adapt. Or just run away, go farther away. But what Mumbai is going to do, because I become also an urban planner, in the next land use plan which we are preparing, and because of the MTHL now being ready, the more and more land which is opening up is much away from the coastal sites, because resilience is built in the land use plan itself. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. This is another image of Mithi river. Please don't keep the images you saw in the morning. You can keep this image with you in your mind when you leave this hall. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Deshpande. I think we are going to take questions at the end and integrate it with the discussion, mainly because of severe time constraints. Yes, I get to introduce myself twice. So my name is Supriya. I am a PhD researcher in the climate resilience space and also an urban planner. I am conducting my research from the Netherlands, but Mumbai happens to be one of my primary case studies. So I'd like to speak a little bit about that. I focus a lot on the resilience knowledge divide between the global north and global south. Before my PhD, I worked with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So it's my great privilege to be able to moderate this session, and I'd like to call the speakers one by one, but I'd like to set very briefly a context for what lies next. To move from risk to resilience fundamentally is to be able to deal with uncertainty in urban planning. This uncertainty comes from climate, from environmental aspects, from institutional uncertainties, political changes, and so on, which we've seen a lot since presentations this morning. I'd like to begin with 4 images. On the top left is the rainwater harvesting system in Mumbai. And all four images in a certain way contribute to building resilience in the context that they are in. So this is a rainwater harvesting system in a housing complex in Mumbai. This image is actually the location of the World Rowing Championship in the Netherlands. And it also happens to be one of the lowest points in the Netherlands, which is 20 feet below sea level, which is a good example of a public amenity that acts as an absorption or a utilitarian function to absorb flood water in case of a heavy flooding from the river nearby. This massive infrastructure project is one of the biggest sea locks, if not the biggest sea lock, which is constructed in the Netherlands. So it regulates water levels between the sea and the river to make sure that there's no overflows and flooding to areas around it. And it manages water for about 2,300 square kilometers in the area around it. By that, it certainly is an engineering marvel, which the Netherlands is known for. However, this infrastructure right now runs at half capacity, and for a long time in the future might have to continue to run at half capacity because it's leading to saltwater intrusion from the sea to the river, which basically means that the agricultural land around it gets impacted. And despite being one of the top engineering projects, possibly the world, and offering one of the highest protection levels, there are cascading impacts that need to be accounted for, even in infrastructure that's built to confront risk. And finally, I think this is a familiar image most of us are familiar with, which is the underground flood storage in Tokyo, and also under implementation in many parts of the world, including a model in Mumbai as well. Let's take a step back and look at how cities across the world are thinking about urban resilience and how they kind of bring it into planning responses. So this is a very fundamental observation. We looked at a lot of scientific documents that talk a lot about implementing resilience. And what we see are kind of 7 to 8 broad principles or characteristics, as we call, in terms of being able to translate resilience into an urban plan. For instance, most cities talk about adaptivity in terms of adaptive renewal, rezoning, and so on. Everyone wants to have buffers in their green roofs, retention parks. Cities want to have redundancy, multiple routes, backups of energy systems in case of a crisis. They want more diverse urban functions. They want flexibility. They want multifunctional urban functions, water squares, parking garages that can become flooding channels, and a lot of examples that we've seen since morning. Which brings us to the question, where is the flexibility in very hyperdense situations like Mumbai and a lot of other cities to really bring in these sort of principles in our existing planning? So if we look at the city around us, you can kind of classify it into, let's say, 3 to 7 or 10 broad urban infrastructure systems in which you might want to have resilience. So from the bottom to the top, you start with the most dynamic spaces, which are your unplanned open spaces or parks and roofs and so on, that can be transformed pretty quickly in 3 to 10 years with whatever interventions the city would like to do. As you move up this scale, you have buildings that take about 20 years to change their function. You have something more concrete as you move up, which is networks like transport and energy, which once invested today will last at least 100 years. And then you have natural resources, which are floodplains, mangroves, forests, and so on, that kind of last a lifetime. And any changes or destruction in them is almost permanent, at least for a few generations. To reflect a little bit on where this flexibility lies for the case of Mumbai, we did a set of long format interviews with 19 senior practitioners working on the city of Mumbai. They came from the background of policy advisors, bureaucrats, academic researchers, sustainability experts, engineers, urban planners, and so on. And all of them had to deep dive into what really are the thinking processes behind climate-related responses for the city, and where exactly can they integrate this into existing urban systems. So if we go back to our original diagram for Mumbai, most practitioners speak very highly of making the city more adaptive. And if we look at the projects that they talk about, there is For instance, having green corridors along rivers, or transforming highways into gray to green infrastructure, having more permeability. The second, and I think the most highly rated characteristic for Mumbai is the buffer, which is achieved through a range of projects that, I mean, a lot of us have already discussed, through retention parks, rainwater harvesting, underground flood discharge channels, all of which try to buffer the rainfall that the city gets each year. And there's two other characteristics that a lot of practitioners speak about, but is not integrated particularly, is flexibility in planning. And this primarily for the reasons that we discussed before, is a very, very dense urban fabric. And also multiscalarity, which is the ability to think how one system impacts the other and what are the implications of those in space. So if we try to connect them with the urban systems that we just looked at in the previous slide, we see a pretty good distribution. So we see that a lot of the principles that, literature or science kind of recommends is targeting quite well into different urban systems that the city has. However, if you look at this closer in terms of implementation, we see that a lot of interventions are still focused on the most dynamic layers, that are the open spaces and buildings. And not to say this is a bad thing, but in scientifically speaking, these are the ones that have short-term impacts from a climate perspective. So it's only once we move up the ladder is that the impacts get more and more long-term, and that's when it becomes more permanent, and that's why it needs deliberation. A representation like this allows us to look at what is the interplay between these different systems. What happens when, for instance, I need to make a trade-off for major infrastructure projects, which Mumbai has to do. For instance, if I build a metro, which is a very, very permanent network, or the coastal road, or any massive infrastructure undertaking, how do I manage the mitigating properties of the natural resources that have to be displaced for this infrastructure versus what this infrastructure brings to the city? And that is the kind of conflict that our city deals a lot with, which is why mapping projects in terms of what other characteristics that they bring to the city, to the urban systems that they target, and what does that mean in terms of a financial and environmental trade-off, is of great importance for a city that really wants to transform its urban planning. For instance, a lot of the projects for buffer that we see are based on regulations for land conversion, managing the coast better, having green corridors along rivers, having green areas around metros, which is the new initiative, and having underground water storage. But if you look at a lot of other aspects, such as diversity of spaces, a lot of it already exists, but it hasn't been something that practitioners actively discuss in the interview process that we conducted, or neither is it part of very official documents that we looked at for the city. So I'd like to extract some critical comments from the interviews and what practitioners are saying. Oh, apology for the mistake, but the first one, of course, is planning being reactive and heavily reactive, which is a quotation directly that we see from a number of practitioners that we spoke with. The second is that a robust data-driven understanding, which has been mentioned quite a few times, but in this case, an understanding of maladaptive planning and what is an undesirable trade-off does not exist. The focus is a lot on desirable trade-offs. Let's see what's the best solution, but not what if this does not go well and what's a bad solution. And that, I think, connects well also to the two speakers, expert speakers prior to me, who discussed sectorally what happens with waste and what happens with riverfront management, and why is it important to have a very scientific understanding of what happens if we don't adapt. The third and very important aspect for a region that's transforming is that it's still planning for a single future scenario based on past trends, at least in its official documents, and it needs to really push to have at least longer term views, if may or may not be a concrete view, but to kind of diversify and have multiple viewpoints for planning. And as a quote goes, projects with long gestation periods are hard because planners don't see beyond 3 years. And that's, I think, more a practical challenge more than anything else. Existing planning instruments tend to be overly regulatory, incremental, prescriptive, and more than half the practitioners that we spoke to see this. And of course, the final one being that every project needs to allocate a minimum of 5 years for delays and litigations. And that directly relates to the second point, which is the data-driven understanding of maladaptation. And what these points and this whole exercise points to in the end is that there is a lack of a larger, or there's a need for a larger or long-term overview. What is the cost of making Mumbai resilient on the surrounding regions of Mumbai? So the larger MMR region, which is now expanding more and more, and also for the rest of Maharashtra. Because in finding solutions for Mumbai, I think we treat the model boundary very strictly, and because population is now kind of dispersing to the rest of the western coast around Mumbai, it's important to have resilience as an interscalar practice, and that's something that is recurrent in a lot of the studies that we also do, and not just restricted to a single channel or a single area or a single ward within the city. It's time to think broadly. So one of the things that we do to have a larger overview of the city, and this is both work in progress, is try to build or visualize land use simulation for the future, such that we can then map the risks to different infrastructure for different climate scenarios. So we have a mature model, for instance, which we built for the city or the metropolitan region of Amsterdam, actually. So Amsterdam is only a smaller part here that lets us visualize what the city might look like in 2050. We use this model to conduct a consultation with planners in the region to look at multiple ways in which they might want the city to grow or not grow. That's not covered in this presentation, but I'm happy to talk about it. And the same exercise is something that we would like to do for the Mumbai metropolitan region, though this is a very, very rough model, which also took a fair amount to bring together, is to really have more visual evidence of where is it that growth is expected to grow into the future. If we are looking at housing 26, 27 million people, what are the vulnerable infrastructure networks, and what are really the regional multi-scalar impacts of this on the growth of the financial capital of the country. Thanks so much for your time. I'd like to invite the panelists one by one to kind of reflect on what we can learn, but also what we can unlearn in their practices for risk to resilience, the practicalities of adapting infrastructure to climate risks, competing priorities. So what is the trade-offs between economics and ecosystem, and how do we get to a prudent, more regulatory framework, capitalizing on the data revolution. So I think that's been a buzzword today. Number 6 is how can we start building an inventory of urban systems in Mumbai, especially if we want an overview like this to think on a more holistic scale. And finally, to find possible collaborations and knowledge exchanges. So thanks for that. And I'd like to invite Pooja to introduce the next panelist.
Thank you, Ms. Krishnan. Moving forward for the same panel discussion, I would now like